why Azure Data Share is so cool, because for the past 40 years, we've been building solutions to share information, to move information across systems, to integrate information, different data points together. And it has been pretty much rinse and repeat. Yeah, technology has changed. Now we can work with terabytes of information or petabytes of information, but the fundamentals for sharing information, the business needs, they are still the same. And we're still, every time that we have to build a solution, we have to run and execute all those activities that we saw before. So Azure Data Share is here to make those things easier for us. So this service was generally available back in 2019. So it's not a new service. It has been around for almost 2 years and a half. I do believe that it has been kept a little bit under the radar. So when was released back in 2019, I was really excited about the service, but during the past 2 years, I haven't seen a lot of marketing, but the service is functional, it's generally available, and all the features that we're going to see today, they are ready for you to use. So none of them are preview features. And we can also expect more capabilities to be added in the upcoming months, because behind the scenes, they have been adding more capabilities and integration with other data stores. So a little bit about me. I'll be your speaker for tonight. So if you want, you have any questions about the session, just send me an email, or easier today, open your microphone and shoot the question. Right, so the agenda. So we don't have a lot of slides. As you can see, we only have 17 slides, and some of them are just titles, because I want us to spend a lot of time with the demos, right? So this session is going to be heavily focused on demos, showing the tool, not only talking about it. So let's go and cover the fundamentals. So the idea with Azure Data Share is that you're trying to share information or move information from one place to another one. So we have to introduce two concepts. The first one is the data provider. Is the organization that is going to share the data with the second concept, the data consumer. So that means that you have the provider, you have the consumer, and there is something that needs to be shared. There is data that needs to be shared. So you can invite your data consumer to take advantage of that information. And you're going to be using two main mechanisms that we're going to revisit later in the presentation. So it'll be the first one, the snapshot, and the second one, the in-place access. So there you have data provider sends an invitation to the data consumer, and the data consumer is going to consume that information by using snapshots or in-place access, two different mechanisms. So to summarize, what you get with Azure Data Share is a no-code experience for sharing information with other organizations while maintaining all the capabilities available in Azure. No-code experience. This means with a few clicks, you can start sharing some of your data assets with an external or internal data consumer. So why to use data share? So there are a few reasons, right? I think that the main reasons that come about how we've been doing things during the past years. So we've been building solutions, sharing information, doing the same for many, many years. Some of the drawbacks or challenges that you can find in the current approach that I'm happy with is that there is a slow time to market. So if you have to share information or build a data movement solution, that takes time, right? It's not going to happen from one day to another one. if you want to follow best practices, and especially in mature organizations with data governance in place and strict processes that need to be followed. It's costly to build because you've seen all the activities that need to be taken into account, right? So as a data architect, when I build a solution, I need to think of the infrastructure, security, connectivity, design, build, test, document, reliability of the solution, so control of failure, the life cycle of those data assets, how frequent we're going to do it, what is going to happen if it fails, what the SLA that we're going to offer to move that information. So it takes time. We have to get involved many resources as well. And it's not only that, once that you build the solution, you need to maintain it, right? So it's not just build a solution and we forget about it. No, we have to maintain it. We have to keep up to date with new capabilities or things that we can do better. Or what we usually do is that we keep adding new features to the solution, right? We always need to try to start small with a solution, but then we keep adding. There is something that we can always do better, IT people, right? And we keep building on top. So it becomes a little bit more challenging and difficult to maintain. And a new one that all of us we should be familiar with is that there is a shortage of professionals. Right now in the market, the reality that if you want to hire data engineers, there are not many available for filling all the positions or cope with the demand of enterprises for building data integration solutions. So in a nutshell, Azure Data Share is going to allow you to mitigate these challenges by just configuring a few options in the Azure portal. So when do you want to use Azure Data Share? So I'll give you a few examples. So the first one is when you want to share information with an external organization. And you can think of data as a service. During the past 2 to 3 years, I had the opportunity to work with many organizations and talk to many people where delivering data as a service is one more product that they want to offer as part of their offering, right? So it doesn't matter which software as a service application you are using or taking advantage of. Most of the time, you want to have access to the information, right? I'll give examples. You might have a payroll system. You want to have access to the data. It's not enough for that payroll system to be a software as a service and a managed platform. You still want to have access to the information. So the same happens with the CRM or your point of sale. So we like to take advantage of software as a service products because they simplify how much investment we need to make for infrastructure and development and all the things. But we also want to still have access to our data. Data consortium is when, imagine just a group of organizations that they want to share information between each other to either to improve the performance or answer a business question or just research, for example, right? So Azure Data Share is going to make it really easy to start sharing those critical data assets with other external organizations to come up with a solution for any of those problems. And the other point of view is that you can also share the information within your organization. When the product first came to the market, I always thought about sharing externally, right? But now you can also think with Azure Data Share that you can share your assets internally within your organization. So that means that you can easily share reference and master data across different departments or multiple different stores as such. And you can think of, by doing that, democratizing the access to information, right? Because we know that the IT department it doesn't usually can cope with all the requests from all the departments. So what we want to do is to start sharing the raw information with them, so they start using it and answering their business questions and performing the data analysis themselves. So right. So with Azure Data Share, we can easily start sharing with other departments, organizations, some of the data assets. And then we have to think about how to use Azure Data Share. So we talked about this, but the important bit that you need to remember is that we have to, the consumer and the provider, both of them, they have to have an Azure subscription, right? And the provider, the consumer, if it doesn't have an Azure subscription, they can easily create the subscription, create an Azure Data Share, because both of them, they need an Azure Data Share. The Azure Data Share is just a logical container where we can configure what needs to be shared. But definitely the two of them need Azure subscription. When it comes to pricing, and I'm going to share my screen now, but because we're going to show you, we're going to make the assumption that not all of you or all of us will have access to create Azure services, right? So I'm going to show you how to easily create an Azure service, the Azure Data Share. One that we finish that, we start talking about pricing. So allow me to share my screen. We'll pick up from that part. All right. From the red, you see this browser is red. That will be our consumer. The one that is this nice purple, it'll be our provider. So I'm going to come here to the Azure portal. Made this bigger. I already have one prepared in case something goes wrong, but while you search for data share, not that one, data share, and we're going to create a new one. You basically select the resource group. That is a logical container for grouping the services by application needs or business unit needs. Select the region, define a name. Let's call it that name. Any name is good. Add a few tags that are going to make it easier for us to navigate the invoices when they come, to do some more analysis or slice and dice the management of the services in Azure. We'll come here, a few of them, review, and create. That's how long it takes actually to start creating the service. They will take 1 minute or two. I wanted you to, I know that we've been talking about Azure services for a long time. We haven't visited this section for I think for a few months. So I thought it was good for us to revisit actually how to easily create the Azure service. Then, of course, you can create the service with PowerShell, with Terraform. You can download the Azure Resource Manager templates and all those things. So before we dive deep into the last few slides that we have, let's talk about pricing. And let's introduce a few concepts here. So the first one is that we're going to pay per dataset snapshot, and we're going to see that when we configure the first one, and then we pay per snapshot execution. So the snapshot execution is the resources that we need to copy the information from the provider to the consumer. Those are the two billing components that Microsoft is going to use for sending us the invoice for Azure Data Share. Now, if we scroll down, there is always nice questions here, and the one that I wanted to highlight actually is who is going to pay for Azure Data Share? Is the consumer or it is the provider? So for moving the information, who is going to pay for those two components, it'll be the data provider. the consumer will visit that, will pay for maintaining and storing the information, the snapshot and compute power. We're going to talk about that, but when we look at these two components, right? Remember, so it'll be the provider who pays for those two components. So once that we finish creating the data share, we are going to go to the resource. And we're going to leave this one here handy for us. Maybe pin it to the dashboard. All right. So now you've seen how to create the data share. I'll go back to the last few slides, and then we'll go back to the demos. So now we understand the concept of provider, consumer, a little bit about pricing, how to create the service, what the service is, what the problem that is solving. So let's talk a little bit about the sharing options that we mentioned before. So there are two main options. The first one is a snapshot, and the other one is sharing in place. So with the snapshot, what's going to happen is that the data is going to be copied from the provider to the consumer. So if, as a provider, I have a file that I want to share, and one of you want the file, so you, the consumer, want the file, so we're going to copy my file to your Azure subscription in one of your services, and we'll see that soon. And then we have sharing in place. Sharing in place, it means that you as a consumer, you have direct access to my file, to my information, without having to copy the data. Now, not the two sharing options are available for all the data stores. And let's go and check that. So when it comes to supported data stores, you can see that many of them, almost all of them, they do support the snapshot, right? When it comes to sharing in place, we can see that only Azure Data Explorer supports sharing in place mechanism. And then we also, as part of the snapshots for the storage accounts, we can share the snapshots incrementally, which is quite cool, right? This is important to, I think, to summarize this bit. So remember, two main options, the snapshots and the sharing in place mechanisms for sharing information. If you just remember that sharing in place is only available for Azure Data Explorer as today, so you know that all the other ones support either a snapshot or a snapshot with incremental. Now, let's move on to almost our last slide before the demos, if not the last one. So the good thing about the service is that you can share from a storage account to a storage account, right? But you can also share from an Azure SQL DB or a database back to a storage account. So that means that if I have an Azure SQL database or a Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool, I can share a table, and on your side, you could have a file, which is great, right? If I have an Azure SQL DB, I can share those tables, so you have them in a Azure Synapse dedicated pool. So see, the combinations there are quite good. So because some of our consumers are going to prefer to have the files because they do the analysis with other tools than Azure SQL DB or Synapse Analytics, and some of the consumers might have databases and they will just want a copy of those tables or views. Right, and with Data Explorer, it just need to be Data Explorer to Data Explorer. Right, so let me go and review the question from Kanungo. So, does data share work in case when I have to share from one SQL pool to another SQL pool? Yes, so if we look at this matrix, so if you have a SQL pool and you want to share to another SQL pool, we just need to check If this is a tick, it means that you can share it. And it happens with the Synapse workspaces, but also it happens with it happens here with the standalone dedicated SQL pools. So if we look at this here, in this here, so you can share SQL pool to SQL pool. And if you have a database, you can also send it to a file, for example. And the demo that we're going to do today, so we're going to keep continue adding complexity to the demo, but we're going to review a few scenarios. All right, so one more question from Manoj. Would the data be in Parquet format or something else if we were to share SQL database to blob storage? I'll show you soon, but the answer is yes. You can share to Parquet file or CSV file, and that's great. So we're going to do it. So allow me to share my screen. And if there are any questions from now on, maybe Henry pick them up because I'm going to stop moving. Stop monitoring.
I can do that.
Okay, thanks, mate. All right, so back in Azure Data Share. So remember, the purple is our provider and our consumer will be this red window here. All right. So everything starts with the provider. So we say that we want to share information. You can see start sharing your data or view received shares, right? So, and you can see the two options on the left side as well. So let's say that I want to first scenario that we're going to see share from storage account to storage account. So I want to create a data share. We're going to put a name, storage account, define the share type, snapshot or in place. If we put in place, it will not work. It allows you to choose the two of them, but it will not work, right? And description, so description here and term of use here. Right. So now we choose the data set. We say that in this case, I'm going to share a data lake storage Gen 2 or storage account with hierarchical namespaces. And we select a storage account from my subscription, where I'm still in the consumer. This is quite exciting here because you can share the whole container, but you can also drill down and share a specific file or a file and a folder. So you can cherry pick what you want. Then we click next. You can change the name of the dataset. So at this stage, we only selected the datasets. Now we can add who is going to receive this information, right? And here I'm going to select the consumer. You can see the consumer at the bottom. It'll be this other account. So I'm going to I don't need to copy that, but I will add the recipient with that email there. We can select if we want this to expire as well. Think about, our engagement will last for 1 year, and if you don't renew the subscription after 18 months, this is going to be disabled automatically. And in the back end, you can also use all the APIs for what we're doing. Now, click continue. We can define how frequent we want to generate the snapshot, if on a daily basis or daily basis. Sorry, daily basis or hourly basis. In this case, I choose daily, and then review and create. Right. So now an invitation were added for this specific data share. So if I go to the invitations, you'll see that my email account has a pending request. So if I go to my email now, I'm going to bring one of the emails. refresh my inbox. I got it in my phone. Now it came here. So this is the email that the consumer is going to get. So I say, hey, you've been invited to this data share. Here you have the instructions as well to create a subscription, but I'm going to just copy the link. And I'm going to go now to the data consumer side. So remember my red window here, this is my consumer. So if I copy the link here, it will take me directly to that invitation. You can also search for data share invitations in the search box. This one here. You can see I have an invitation. I'm going to click on it. And here, the first thing that we need to do in order to continue is to accept the terms of use. If we don't accept this, we are not going to be able to continue or to finalize the process. So we are going to select then to which data share we want to associate this invitation. So I'm going to go to a result group and already have a data share account in this specific subscription. You can specify them. So let's call this one meetup. And see if I don't accept the terms of use, I cannot continue. So we better accept that. And it will take, yep.
Sorry, just to jump in on that, David. From memory, I believe you can customize the terms of use. So then that becomes a contract between you and the person that you're sharing the data with. So you define the terms of use of the data that you're sharing with them, and they must agree to that before they can receive that data. So that ensures then that you are compliant with respect to that sharing activity.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Henry. I think from a governance point of view of our data assets, we really want something better than writing term of use example in our term of use, right? So we want to be quite strict and make sure that we govern correctly our data assets. Right, so we accepted that, but we still need to map and configure our data shares. You can see now it's telling me, hey, you still have two things to do. The first one is to configure the data set, because you need to map this to a destination, right? So right now, we haven't told Azure Data Share where to put the file. So you can either pick up the two of them or just configure one of them. So it is not mandatory for you to choose everything. You can choose what you need. And here, we're going to map this folder to a target. In here, it's going to tell us to select our destination. You start seeing that I can choose a Blob Storage account or Data Lake Storage account. So I select the Data Lake Storage account and I search for my storage account here, and I can either change the path or choose the same container here. Let me go up, choose the container, and map to target. Right, so while I'm here, the next thing that we need to do is that we mapped the source data asset to the target data store. So now we want to refresh the information, right? So you can either enable this to run on a daily basis, and you can also trigger the snapshot manually from here or with the APIs. So in here, I'm going to do the full copy, and at the same time, I can enable this bit by Snow mandatory. Right. So now it's running. What's happening right now, remember, the provider is transferring the information to the data consumer. So that means that if I go to my storage account, Receive shares, pick up the one for the meetup. We can monitor the history here. You can see it's queued. So we open the storage account. This will take around 1 minute or two. Open the container, go to the data lake. And you can see that's starting to copy all the files within here, right? So this is, you can see now it's Australian time in Australian Eastern Standard Time. So it just copy those files. And I will predict that if I refresh, this will be about to finish. It took us 2 or 3 minutes to start sharing data assets with another organization. You can see how easy. No, we haven't had to build anything or look at the security or infrastructure. Everything is managed by Microsoft. So in the meantime, remember, yes.
David, a couple of questions have come in. Do the data consumers Gen 2 account get automatically created? Is one question from Mike. Yeah. So this would be the consumer storage account. Does it get? Does it automatically get created?
No, you have to have it there. You have to create it. Yeah.
And then another question is: will empty folders be copied across?
Will empty folders be copied across? I haven't tested that. Yeah. But we can test it try to test it. I think I haven't tested it. I don't believe that is relevant or quite important, right? If the folder is empty, it's just it's a logical item within the storage account, so it doesn't hold any space actually. Yeah. Right. So using their storage account to storage account. Now we're going to go to the second scenario. So now we're going to copy database to a storage account. So we'll go back to our data provider. We'll create a new one for this one. This one we're going to copy Azure SQL to a storage. Of use. You can update as well existing data share. I haven't mentioned that. So select the data sets. In this case, we're going to go to right. Yeah. Select Azure SQL as the source. We can cherry pick here server. It's going to tell us, hey, for data share to read information, you need to give it access. So you can just copy this information and go to Management Studio. And what this will do is just give access Azure Data Share to read the information. And you can give it any permission that you need in case you have multiple schemas that are not part of DBO. You might need to modify this script slide. So I've done this before. So we just can run this one again. It's a new data share, so I still need to run it. Yeah. Right. So next, one that we have access, we're going to select. You can select the views or table that you want to copy across. We're going to select a couple of them. Contact type, a country, region, and the recipients. We can follow the same process. Send an email to multiple users, so only one. In the settings, we can enable a snapshot, in this case, to run on an hourly basis, and now click create. So now an email is going to be sent to that specific user. I can also be proactive and search for that email in my data share invitations. You can see this just arrived for this data consumer. Now we're back in the red window, which is who is the data consumer. So we click that storage account, agree the term of use, and we first map the data share invitation. That's the only thing that we're doing right now. And we have to configure this again. So here's where it becomes, it is quite amazing actually. I can tell you that this table here, I want to map it to multiple platforms, just not a database. I can send this table to a Synapse SQL pool, dedicated SQL pool, SQL database, or a storage account. So I will choose my data lake storage account. And we can also select the path, but the question from before, so we can select this other folder that the table goes inside this folder that we have created, but we can choose the output as well, either Parquet or CSV file. So this was the question from before. So I select the Parquet file, map to target, and now we can trigger the snapshot. All right, so you can see now it's going to, the provider is giving us table, but I have selected a Parquet file in a storage account as the destination for the consumer. So you give us some flexibility, which I believe is one of the most amazing features that we have there, because the way that we've been doing this is building Azure Data Factory pipelines or Synapse integration pipelines. So this makes things really easy for anybody to start sharing those data assets. There is not, as you can see, I would say that there needs to be an understanding and knowledge of the information that is being shared, but you don't need to be a data engineer to follow the steps that we have followed for Azure Data Share at this stage. Yeah. Right. Do you have any questions in the chat before we go to the next scenario?
Yeah, David, so the destination type there on the last screen, you only can pick Gen 2? Yeah, the target type.
You can play blob storage as well.
Can you pick Gen 1? Not for SQL Server, but Gen 1 for data flows and data sets?
You mean?
So I've got clients that only have Gen 1, and I'd like to share with them data flows or data sets.
Okay, you mean the Azure Data Lake Gen 1?
Yes. Can the destination for the consumer be Gen 1? Because not everybody has Gen 2.
Yeah.
No, and I don't think Gen 1 supports the Blob API, does it?
Right, okay.
Yeah.
There's no Gen 1.
Look, long story short, if it's not here, it doesn't support it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Let me see as well.
So there was another question. Any additional access set up on resources being set up for this service? I'm not so sure what the question is about. Do you want to add more detail?
Okay, I continue with the previous question. You can see here Data Lake Storage Gen 1 supports output to Blob Storage and Data Lake Storage Gen 2, which is quite cool. But if I come from a database, it doesn't support Data Lake Storage Gen 1. So it's a little bit of a mix. I think from Gen 1, you can move them to Gen 2 and Blob Storage, but from a database, you cannot go to Gen 1, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have a Gen 1 to test it, but yeah, it seems that what the answer will be yes, right? For the scenario that you were talking about.
Say again?
The answer will be yes, right? You were asking about sharing Gen 1 to Gen 2?
Oh, that's fine. Gen 1 to Gen 2, no problem. I'm thinking of someone wants to, the consumer only has Gen 1. So we have to tell them they have to set up a Gen 2 if they want to do sharing.
Yeah, that's it. You can see this column here is quite empty.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Yeah, the question about security, whatever security you have configured in your destination data store, that's the one that is going to be in place, right? So we haven't done anything about security because remember, we're sending the file to an existing data store. So that means that the security that we already have in place as a data consumer, that's the one that is going to be running for the new asset. I don't know if it answered the question, but hopefully it provides some value. Right. Okay, we checked 2 scenarios. We have 2 more to go. Let's see if we have time. So the first scenario, remember to summarize, it was a storage account to a storage account. The second one was Azure SQL DB to a storage account. Now we can look to do something cross-platform, cross-technology as well. So what we're going to do now is to pick up one of our existing subscriptions, data shares, and we're going to add here a new one. And in this case, in the same one, I want to share from a SQL pool. We're going to share to from SQL pool to an Azure SQL DB. So in my management studio, I have a SQL pool here open. I have to follow the same steps, give access data share to read information. And here we're going to pick up one of the tables from the dedicated SQL pool. Let's pick up team customer, currency, but might be smaller. And we have added a new data set to an existing configuration, right? So that means that as a consumer, I don't have to accept the invitation again because we've done that already. So I can just go to my data share. And if I look at that data share from before, you see that we have, let me make sure that we're in the right spot. We're in the right spot, right? Yeah, so let me go back to here. So we're sharing one more data set. Right, so I would expect that to show up here, unless I'm in the incorrect place. No, I'm in the right spot, so we'll give it some time. And we'll continue. Okay, so now what we've done here is to add one asset to an existing subscription. We'll work for that one to see if it works. I don't believe we have to do anything else here. So, but what we're going to do next is to go to the next scenario. So now we're going to play with Azure Data Explorer. So because Azure Data Explorer is the only one that supports sharing in place. And as I mentioned before, what it means is that the information that is being shared, so the data will still be here for Azure Data Explorer. So the consumer will be able to read that information without moving it to our destination data consumer, okay? So that means that we're only paying for compute power and for the information that is cache, but we're not paying for moving all the information from the data provider to the data consumer. So let's go and check that other example. So we'll go back to our data provider. So we'll create a new share. So in this case, we call it Azure Data Explorer. We can select the in place option. In the data set, you can see it only allows me to select Azure Data Explorer. we search for an Azure Data Explorer cluster. It doesn't show you the Synapse Azure Data Explorer clusters, only the standalone Azure Data Explorer cluster. That's something that we need to remember. And if we had multiple databases, we can pick up only one of them, or we can select the cluster. And if a new database is added, it'll become available for the data consumer. So in this case, we're going to pick up this database. In this case, it doesn't allow us to go to a more granular level, so we cannot go to the tables level, but we can select this database. We add it, same process. We can select our member, click create, and now we go back to our consumer one more time. So we'll can search for the invitations or wait for the email.
So just while we're waiting on that, David, there's a question. Does the destination user need to be set up as a guest in the source Azure Active Directory?
No. No. You mean as to a guest in Azure Active Directory, if you have to do that before? No.
Yes, so it basically eliminates this B2B sharing, inviting guest accounts into your Active Directory, because it's the Azure Data Share service that manages the contract between the two organizations. So you don't have to worry about granting those individual users access into your environment.
That's it. Thank you for expanding on that answer, Henry. Yeah, that's why it's so handy, right? So it just take knowing the email address of our data consumer to start sharing information without any downtime, and it just takes a few minutes to do that. All right, so scenario for Azure Data Explorer. So again, we have to agree the term of use, select our destination, Azure Data Share account, and then configure the dataset in this case. You can see here we don't have anything about snapshots, hourly, daily, anything like that, because remember this will be direct access, live connection to that provider data store. So we can map that one to an existing data explorer that I have. That will have the in there. I'll show you the data explorer of the consumer. So if I go and look at my table, see this is not displaying anything. It's like broken. So there is no anything here. So we're going to finish the configuration in the data consumer. Not to target. We don't need this anymore, so let's speed. It will take a couple of minutes. Yep.
David, do you have a sample of a Power BI data flow?
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Kind of. We might cover Power BI data flows in the future, but I don't have anything here. I don't know if we might need to add if we're talking about the data lake folders or common data model or something like that, but we don't have any example for that.
Chris Webb did it with a CDM. So obviously the CDM works. I'm just wondering if you could just do it straight from a data flow instead of going to CDM.
Yeah, no, I haven't tested that, to be honest.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, but we might have a second session about that, right? Because today we'll keep it simple. And yeah, I haven't seen that demo from Chris Webb, which it seems like to be an amazing scenario, right? All right, so data explorer finished. now I can share, refresh, and you can see in the Consumer Data Explorer, the information is already available. Now, so let me see. Not really good with Data Explorer, but I'm sure that that's how you write query. I need to do a course for querying information in ADX, but all right. Right. So I think we had some cache from before. So those are our tables in the data consumer, and we can query them. So next scenario for same Azure Data Explorer, we're going to add a new table into Azure Data Explorer for the provider and see how fast it becomes available in the consumer. So I'm going to go one more time to my data provider, go to Data Explorer, and I have a really nice wiki here to create a new table. So we're going to call this table countries in the provider. Select the file to keep it simple. Might be this one here. So remember, we're in the provider, in the Data Explorer, creating a new table. So next, so now the table is available in the provider. If I refresh this, you see it there. And if I go to the consumer, I refresh this here, and we see the new countries table that is immediately available for the consumer. This is how long it takes to copy the information, right? There's no equal. So we're reflecting information. So do you have this scenario where Azure Data Explorer doesn't move the information, but the consumer will have still to pay per caching the information and the compute power used for Azure Data Explorer? Do you have any questions?
No questions at the moment. Mike's
Okay.
just posting Chris's article.
Nice. Right. And we'll go to the last one now. So the last one I want to show you, actually, it doesn't need, so we're not going to use this account, so I'm going to close it. So you have many scenarios where the provider could be the consumer of the same subscription as well. So imagine that you want to share reference data or master data across different departments without having to go to Azure Data Factory or Synapse Pipelines or any other solution. So I'm going to create a new invitation here, and we're going to call this one internal share. And the data set, just I can pick up a table from my Azure SQL database. So we've done that in the past. Select one of the tables. So let's say country region. And so I don't get confused. Say my recipient in this case is going to be the same user. So I'm going to put here the same user. So the same account. Go to the snapshots. We've done this quite a few times. And now we are going to, with the same account, I can go to my invitations. And I have an invitation from my own user, but trying to simulate that we're sharing the information with an internal department is going to ask the same steps. You have to map this to a data storage account. Sorry, data share account. So let's pick up this one. Right. And now it's going to ask us to follow the same steps. So it's saying, hey, you have this country meetup, map it to a target, and we're going to select a different database. So let's pick up same server, but we're going to move to this light database. In this case, I need to give access to write. So if I look at these permissions here, I think we never looked at the other one. Okay, but we're going to copy with data share. We're going to copy a table from this database, AdventureWorks, to AdventureWorks light. So I need to give access to write and create tables. And now click next, map to target. We're going to kick off the snapshot. What I didn't share before, actually, on the client side. So when we have, we didn't finish the CNAS one. No, that's fine. So country meetup finished. So if I go back to this database here and refresh. Let me. If I've done everything correctly, it will show up there. Yeah, let's check this queue. Right. So now it's kicking off. It will take again 1 minute or so. So are there any other questions there in the chat in the meantime?
There is. I'm presuming there's no way of sharing from on-premise. Are you aware of any future plans in this area? For example, using self-hosted integration runtime, which is available in ADF.
Yeah, so I'm not aware of any. So I couldn't find any roadmap for Azure Data Share on how to do that, and if on-premises data store they're going to become available here. That's something that potentially we can follow up with the product team, but at this stage it's not available, and if I have to guess, it won't be available this financial year. Now I can give you an alternative, right? So instead of using you have to help me with this one, Henry, but you could copy, if you don't want to use Azure Data Factory for copying from a SQL Server to an Azure SQL DB, you can use, there is a product that's called Azure SQL. There is a product in Azure to copy data between SQL Server and Azure SQL DB.
Are you talking about the database migration assistant?
No, I'm talking about another one that can do that with change tracking on.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I can't remember the name of it, but it's
the name is
it's not very
similar
good
to this.
for large data sets, unfortunately.
No,
which is the thing, and it's not great for schema change. What I would say, Gavin, is SQL Server 2022 with Synapse Link, which will automatically, so basically it'll automatically set up CDC, similar to CDC that's now available in Azure SQL PaaS. But then you can either persist the data in a Synapse environment on storage, I understand. So you create external tables over the top and you could share them out. Or you could actually have a direct link back. So it doesn't actually bring the data over into Azure, but you query it. So that's something that's coming in SQL 2022. I'm sort of hoping they'll backport it to SQL 2019 as well. But I haven't heard anything on data share for any on-prem repositories. But it's, as David said, there hasn't been a lot of talk about data share for a while, but I'd certainly watch this space because I think there may be announcements around it. Maybe not at Build, but maybe at Ignite, which is in a few months' time.
There you go. Yeah, I think, look, the capability that you get from the service, and we'll summarize soon, right? Let's go and check the last thing, but the thing that we here with a couple of clicks, they're just great. So let's go and check. Our table should be here. Which table did I copy? It was country region? I think it was. So my memory. Let's go in here to send shares. Yeah, it was country region. So you can see that table. I think my was available there before. I didn't see it. But the table is already available. So you can see how you can share tables and files with internal departments with just a few clicks without having to go and get involved the IT team or having to spend time and money and resources and effort on building solutions, because then you need to maintain them as well, right? So when it comes to share information internally, I think from my point of view, that's one of the scenarios that I see more frequently, and we can take advantage of in any company potentially. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We'll do some summary because we covered a lot of ground for being a beginner session. All right, so let's summarize a little bit what we've done, right? So we checked multiple scenarios. So we did the storage account to storage account, Azure SQL to a storage account with Parquet file. We did Azure Data Explorer to Azure Data Explorer while using the different mechanism for accessing the information. And we also ran a scenario for sharing information internally within our organization, which is quite cool. The one that was pending there, but it didn't seem to show up, it was modifying an existing share to add a different table from Synapse. So that didn't work. But Synapse to Azure SQL DB, it works in a new data share because I've tested that in the past and I used that. So look, Azure Data Share has been there for, as I said before, 2.5 years. They're available for us to use without having to run all the activities that we mentioned before, right? So design, build, test, document, look at the infrastructure, networking, security, storage. So Azure Data Share with a couple of clicks is going to allow you to start sharing information internally or externally without having to go through that process. So let's open for questions.
No
Okay,
questions in the chat. Sorry.
Everyone's being shy. So yeah, David, that was a fantastic presentation. I wish I was having a beer with you, but that's too bad. But I'd like to see a version 2. Yeah, so great introduction. If we could do version 2 to do some more complex stuff like CDM and data flows. I know that's Power BI, but it's all along the same vein of this product. I'd just like to see it in action.
Yeah, I think the two scenarios that you asked for, I think they'll be great for another session. I think actually the first time that we talk about Azure Data Share, it's something that we haven't talked about in this user group before. And potentially if we start talking about it, we'll run into more complex scenarios that we can solve together.
And so David, do you see anyone writing ETL anymore for doing this type of thing? So I said a statement saying, if I have to expose data to external parties, I just throw that all out the window. It's all gone. In 5 minutes, I do the whole thing. Who cares?
Yes.
Yeah, but you have work of a different type, right? We'll have look, I've seen most organizations that keep building the pipelines, allocating data engineers to build the data movement solutions, creating FTP servers, fighting with the providers to agree on service level agreements. So all the things, they are quite current, actually. They are not old. That's why I'm surprised that there are not many companies taking advantage of Azure Data Share, right? So every time that we have to send information to provider, we think, oh, let's build another pipeline. Oh, let's build another package in SQL Server Integration Services, right? So, or let's send the file to FTP server, right? I think the skills, we could argue that, oh no, the provider now needs Azure, right? Hey, it's our job as well to tell them, hey, you need Azure, but if I put it in a storage account, it's really extremely cost effective, And people love cloud, so I think this will speed up development, and we can do more complex scenarios, as you mentioned before. So that's all from me for today. Thank you for coming along. I'm sorry about postponing the event by 1 day. So I'll hand it over back to you, Henry.
Oh, we have another question. Can you map the destination to an existing Azure SQL table? And if so, does it perform simple ETL for you?
Yeah, if the table has the same schema, same everything, right? So remember, it's going to override information. It's going to, so it's a full load every time with the tables. There's no incremental load. So to start with, if the structure is different, it will not work. If the structure is the same, I don't know if it drops the table before inserting the new information, but if it doesn't drop the table, it's going to truncate the table, definitely. And yeah, it does the ETL job for us. I would say that it does the E and the L. It won't do the T bit, right? It will do an extract and load, but it won't transform the information in Fly.
Do you think, what sort of size limits would there be on data that can be moved?
I haven't seen any limitations around size. It'll come down. I mean, you have to think about the bandwidth and where you're moving information from and to, right? So if we move the information within Australia, right? So things are going to go really fast, and it will be using the backbone of the Azure data centers and all that infrastructure. But if you start moving things to different regions overseas and terabytes of information, not something that I have tested, but something that we have to be cautious of.
Yeah. And egress cost is probably going to get incurred.
There'd be no egress because you're going Azure to Azure. Because remember, Azure Data Share can only be deployed in Azure. But yes, if you're going cross-region or cross-trans-Pacific or something like that, there's additional networking costs as you move the data further away. But let's say your data share is deployed in a Sydney region, and the person who's receiving that data is also in the Sydney region. I think that the costs around that will be negligible. The majority of your cost is actually going to be on the data share service itself. So the compute that's accessing that data, let's actually put a link into bandwidth pricing. But remember, underneath Azure Data Share, there's a storage account provision, there's an Azure Data Factory, there's, I think, it utilizes Azure Service Bus. So it's like Synapse, it's bundled a lot of existing services together into a single uniform platform that just makes it easier to use. And that's probably where the majority of your cost is going to be. But, if you're sharing, an incremental share of maybe, 100 gigabytes once a week, it's not going to be a lot of money.
Yeah, it's just interesting to think about all the different aspects of it, but it's a fantastic tool.
Yeah, it is. And so easy. I think what I found actually so easy to use. You know, I thought the first thing I thought, okay, this anybody can do this, right? You just put governance, control, security, you know, all the things, but then anybody can do that. So that's great for everybody, I think.
Absolutely. Thanks, David. It was really good.
No worries. Yeah.